Chapter 172. Shizun doesn't eat children. The gales the gun had stirred spread apocalyptic fire over most of Linyi. The cultivators who had come for the wedding fled on their swords in every direction, the merciless flames nipping at their heels. Any cultivator who depleted their spiritual energy lost the race and met their end, swallowed by the inferno. The escaping cultivators overflew many of the villages clustered around Rufeng's lofty cities. These commoners from the upper cultivation realm were struck with horror when they saw the great fire slowly approaching from the direction of Rufeng Sect. The panicking families picked up to flee, but what means did they have to escape this conflagration, bearing down like a flow of lava? "Dad! Daddy! Daddy!" The cries and shouts of the villagers rose as they passed over. Zhenjong and the others expanded their weapons to their maximum sizes, and each pulled aboard a full load of commoners. Madame Wang murmured a continuous stream of comforting words. "Don't cry, all of you, don't cry. Slide on over and sit in the middle. Be careful, hold on tight to each other, don't fall." But the iron fan couldn't be expanded any further, and there were too many in the villages who couldn't be saved. Kneeling at the front, Zhenjong leaned over to grab another wailing child. But as he tried to pull them up, the iron fan shuddered violently, unable to bear the additional weight. He had no choice but to let go and watch helplessly as that tear-stained, hopeful face was swiftly flung far behind. Zhenjong was a man of steely resolve, but he couldn't help howling in grief. Why? Why? Because one man was treated unfairly, he must drag all these innocents to the grave? He wept, tears rolling down his frank face. As if this world isn't already enough of a mess. As if there aren't enough people who die in vain. Madame Wang's eyes were also reddened. She cradled a rescued child in each arm. Both children's parents had pushed them onto the iron fan, but had been consumed by the flames before they themselves could climb to safety. The children sobbed in Madame Wang's embrace as she patted their small heads. What comfort could she offer them? She knew not what to say. She looked behind her. Out of the 10 or so cultivators who had been following them, several had disappeared, having succumbed to the fires. Others had set out in a different direction altogether, like Wannning and Moran. She silently prayed for their safety, her eyes filled with tears. Not far away, Jiangxi carried the still unconscious Shuomeng, the fire's glow playing over his graceful features. His beautiful sword was ill-suited to carrying a heavy load and buzzed incessantly beneath his feet. Jiangxi glared at Shuomeng disdainfully. He'd been tempted to throw the spread off into the flames several times, but when he saw Madame Wang's imploring expression from the iron fan, he gloomily pursed his lips and held him steady. Zhenjong was weeping as he tried to pull a younger and lighter child onto the fan, but however dearly he wished for it, his weapon had nothing left to give. He once again let go of a hand he'd grabbed, on the verge of breaking down. Still kneeling, he curled in on himself, the inadequacy of his own strength tearing him apart. At that precise moment, a rosy light flashed. Jiangxi waved his hand, radiance shining from his sleeve, and lifted the girl Zhenjong couldn't pick up onto his own sword. The buzzing sound from the resplendent Zhu Huang grew even louder. Short-tempered, Jiangxi stomped on the blade and snapped. "What are you complaining for? If you've got the balls, you can stop here and wait for the fire to burn you up." Sure enough, Zhu Huang went silent. It sailed ahead with Jiangxi and the other 2 passengers without another peep, though the slender sword really did look like it might break under the strain at any moment. Jiangxi drew near Zhenjong and shot him a contemptuous glare. "What's a grown man like you crying about?" he said sharply. "If you can save them, then do it. If you can't, then don't. Why make a scene?" "Shidi," murmured Madame Wang. Am I wrong?" Jiangxi sneered. Although he was handsome, the malicious curve of his mouth made him look terribly cold. "If you'd stayed at Guyuye instead of leaving with him, how would you be so feeble now? You can't even ride your own sword. If you weren't sitting on that fan, your heroic savior of a husband would be able to rescue someone else." Madame Wang seemed stung by these words. She lowered her face and slowly closed her eyes in silence. Far in the opposite direction, Moran had also expanded his sword to an enormous size. In addition to Wannning, it now carried a full load of commoners from the upper cultivation realm. The refugees shivered and sniffled, watching blankly as their homes were swallowed by the sea of fire and burned to the ground. They closed their eyes and broke down in mournful sobs, their tears reflecting the flames. Moran remained silent in this grave atmosphere. Unlike Zhu Qingyong, he hadn't sought out pointless struggles. He knew he couldn't carry anymore, so he no longer looked down at the wailing, screaming villagers rushing by beneath him. His brow furrowed slightly. "The coast is up ahead. Shizun, where should we go?" "Can you make it to Flying Flower Isle?" Flying Flower Isle was the island closest to Linyi in the upper cultivation realm. Moran nodded. "I'll make it, but I'm not too familiar with the East Sea, so I'll need to focus on navigating. Shizun, keep an eye on everyone and make sure they stay awake. It's crowded up here. If someone falls asleep, they might slip overboard." "Okay." Wannning agreed. Moran pressed ahead for more than 2 hours. As dawn glimmered pale on the horizon and the sun emerged in the east, they broke through the clouds and saw a modest ring-shaped island surrounded by sparkling jade-green waters. At last, they'd arrived at Flying Flower Isle. Although this island fell under the aegis of Rufeng Sect, it was remote and sparsely populated. Most of the residents were independent fishermen who lived off the sea, and there was only one family of any wealth. The islanders had anxiously spotted the huge fire engulfing Rufeng Sect as a bloody glow on the horizon across the raging surf. No one knew what had happened. Many watched from the doorsteps, too afraid to sleep for fear that flames would soon blanket their own skies. By daybreak, that strange phenomenon hadn't reached their island. Instead, a vast dark sword carrying a crowd of people touched down on a shoal. At its helm was a tall and dashing young man, his cheeks stained with streaks of dried blood, as if he had endured a fierce battle. Flying Flower Isle had no cultivators, and its leaders were all ordinary people. Everyone was frightened by the sight. They didn't know if this man was friend or foe, or why he had come. "Yeah, why are all their faces all sooty?" One of the villagers muttered, peering at the assorted crowd behind Moran. "Must have come out of that big fire. Did they fly here from Linyi?" A broad-shouldered fisherman gathered his courage and approached the strangers. Are you all from Rufeng Sect?" "Xisheng Peak." Moran passed the child in his arms to Wannning. The toddler was too young to stay awake through the night, so Moran had carried him in his arms the whole way to ensure he wouldn't be crowded off the sword. "There was some trouble at Rufeng Sect, and these are all residents of Linyi. The apocalyptic fire was too powerful, and the sword could only carry so many. I couldn't save many of them. Moran had babbled out half his explanation before he looked up and saw the fisherman's bewildered expression. He realized he was speaking too quickly. How would the residents of Flying Flower Isle know anything about apocalyptic fire or the limitations of sword-riding techniques? He pressed his lips together, then said gently, "I'm sorry. I'll explain the details later." He turned toward the exhausted, defeated crowd behind him. "Could you first get them some water and food?" One of the orphaned children had come close, helpless with panic. He slowly nudged Moran's leg and reached up, tugging on the corner of his robe with a tiny hand. Moran looked down and patted him on the head. I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience," he said to the fishermen. Most of the islanders were kind-hearted, and tea and food were quickly brought over. Moran briefly summarized the story. They gaped in astonishment, staring blankly at the unbroken line of firelight on the horizon. "Rufeng Sect burned down?" someone said incredulously. "Nangong Changmen is dead?" "He isn't dead. He was given a lingchi fruit and taken away," said Moran. "What's a lingchi fruit?" "That's a..." Wannning watched from the sidelines as Moran patiently explained to the fishermen. He didn't step forward himself. He was perfectly aware that he looked uncaring by nature, his features chilled as if by frost. It would be far better to leave Moran to handle the locals. The child he held had begun to stir. On waking to find himself in the arms of this cold-looking stranger, he started and began to wail. Gone was all the docility he'd shown in Moran's arms. Wannning glanced over at Moran. He was still engrossed in conversation with the locals, leaving Wannning to fend for himself. Out of habit, he put on a stern expression and told the child, "Don't cry." The child's wails rose in pitch. "Daddy! Mommy!" he cried over and over. I want my daddy! I want my mommy!" "Don't cry." Wannning stiffly tried to comfort him. "You don't cry." "Mommy! Mommy!" With one hand occupied, holding the child, Wannning lifted his other to pat him on the head. The child jerked back, avoiding his touch. His face was bright red, covered in tears and snot as he wailed, I want my mommy! I want my daddy! I want to go home!" Wannning was at its wit's end. He had never been in a position to comfort a child before, and had no clue what to say. He racked his brain for ways to soothe the boy, but as he sank into thought, a crease formed between his brows, giving him the air of a sword forged of steel, dark and cold as ice. The miserably howling child happened to glimpse at Wanning's expression as he kicked and struggled. So terrifying was the sight that he instantly choked on his sobs, unable to make another sound. He bit his lip, great round tears falling from his eyes like a broken string of pearls. Suddenly, Wannning remembered something. He untied his chiankon pouch with his free hand and pulled out a sticky rice candy. After peeling off the paper wrapper, he handed it to the child. The child hiccuped. Eyes swimming with tears, he looked silently at Wannning, then at the candy in his hand. Like most children, his mother had raised him on folk tales. No few-featured scary cultivators who snatched away disobedient children to feed them sleeping potions before refining them into pills of immortality. The child silently held back his tears and stared at Wannning in terror. Wannning stared blankly back, still holding up the sticky rice candy. He didn't get it. His phoenix eyes were slightly upturned, their ends long and slender. Such eyes were beautiful, but they appeared haughty and calculating when he wasn't smiling. Even with a slight smile, his eyes imparted the wildness of a thorny rose, prickly and arrogant. But most wouldn't appreciate such arrogance. Wanning's face was handsome, but strangers naturally didn't find it likable, and especially not strange children. "Eat this." Wannning had watched Moran produce candy to pacify several children while they were on the sword. He was only following his example. He had no idea why this candy was unacceptable. The child pressed his lips closed. He hesitated, trembling, then slowly shook his head. He didn't want to be refined into immortality pills. "Don't you?" Before Wannning could say more, the child broke down sobbing in fright, his cries so heart-rending that everyone around them looked over. Wannning hadn't time to react. Still holding up that sticky rice candy, he murmured, "Like sweets?" Between the sounds of his own sobs, the child misheard Wanning's tentative question as, "Don't you look sweet?" In his little brain, he had come to the definitive conclusion that this cultivator wanted to refine him into pills. Into very sweet pills of immortality, no less. He was so panicked, he began bawling hysterically at the top of his lungs. Wannning stood stiff as a board.